10 bright red scout neckerchiefs lay fanned out across the detective's desk. August 2001.
And those pieces of cloth were holding a secret that was 13 years old. 13 years earlier, early morning, July 15, 1988, at a summer camp in northern Minnesota, on the edge of a pine forest, a woman named Megan Walker woke up. She was a junior counselor.
Not a hero. Not the main one.
Just the person who made sure kids brushed their teeth, didn't run to the water, and didn't bring ants into the tents. But that morning, ants weren't the biggest problem, because the camp was empty. The tents were still there. The fire pit still smelled like smoke.
Wet towels hung on a line.
Everything looked like a normal night had ended in a normal morning.
Except for one thing. 10 kids were gone. And the man responsible for them was gone too.
The head counselor, a former military instructor, strict, organized Victor Hayes On the ground near the dead fire, there was only an old scout drum, and footprints leading in 3 different directions.
An official explanation came fast. Too fast. Like someone already had the answer prepared. They said there had been a storm. The kids panicked, ran, got lost, slipped toward the St. Croix River, and the current took them. No bodies, because wild water and thick forest. Case closed. Condolences. Paperwork. A few days of cameras. Then silence. But Megan had a problem. She didn't remember any storm. She wasn't sleeping.
She was reading under a flashlight like a teenager afraid summer might end too soon.
The sky had been clear. No thunder. No rain.
No wind strong enough to shake tents.
And most importantly, if 10 kids run in blind panic, they don't leave behind 3 clean trails of footprints like 3 decisions made calmly. In 2001, the case resurfaced. Because someone made a strange move. At a small post office near Duluth, an employee opened a package addressed to the county police department.
Inside were 10 scout neckerchiefs.
Clean. Neatly folded. Smelling of detergent like they'd been washed, not in 1988.
A lab tech said it plainly, the fabric had been washed within the last 5 years. Meaning someone had kept them for a long time.
Protected them, and then decided to remind the world. The case landed on Detective Ethan Blake's desk. 40 years old.
A reputation for one thing, he didn't believe in coincidence, because he'd seen too many accidents holding someone else's keys. He started simple, he pulled the 1988 archive. The camp was called Camp Starlight. A routine 3-day trip. 10 teenagers, **, 12 to 14 **. The route was considered safe. Victor Hayes had walked groups through it for years.
Always came back on time. Ethan brought Megan in for another interview.
She walked in with the posture of someone who had told the truth 1,000 times, only to hear, 1,000 times, "You imagined it."
She sat across from him. Hands locked. Voice steady.
But inside that voice lived a hatred for one word, accident.
Ethan said, "Tell me about that night." No theories. Only what you saw. Megan exhaled and said, "I woke up around 2 a.m. because of a sound. Like someone was crying, quietly. Not hysterical. The kind of crying you do when adults are nearby and you're not allowed to be loud." I stepped outside.
Victor Hayes was standing by the fire, and he was burning papers.
Ethan asked, "What kind of papers?" Megan swallowed. ***, the kids' journals, ***. The notebooks they wrote in, drew in, taped leaves into. They're small secrets, the stuff that feels like an entire universe in summer camp. I shouted, "Victor, what are you doing?" He turned.
And I will never forget his face. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept in 2 days.
Like he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see. He said, "They left, Megan. All of them left. I didn't stop them in time." I asked, "Stop them from what?" He didn't answer.
He kept throwing journals into the fire, not like a man destroying paper, but like a man trying to burn evidence.
I tried to grab one.
He shoved me back and yelled, "No one can read this."
No one.
In 1988, that would have sounded like panic. In 2001, it sounded like confession.
Megan continued, and one more thing.
The day before they disappeared, a man came to camp.
Tall. Controlled. Not a tourist. Not a worried father. More like someone used to doors opening on their own.
On his left hand, a scar.
Long.
He said he was looking for his nephew.
Ethan asked, the kid's name?
Megan said, *** Sam Peterson, ***.
Ethan pulled Sam's file.
13 years old.
Adopted. Guardian, a port worker on the Great Lakes.
A photo remained, thin kid, serious eyes, like he already carried adult thoughts.
Megan said, Victor Hayes didn't let the man near the kids. He said, no written permission from the Guardian, no visit. The man left calmly. Too calmly. Like he wasn't there to ask. And then something else happened. That evening, Sam disappeared for 2 hours. He came back pale. Quiet. Victor asked where he'd been. Sam said he went to gather firewood. But he didn't bring any. Ethan shut the folder and felt the pattern form. If this was an abduction, it didn't start at night. It started earlier. Someone was checking the camp like a target. He tracked down a man who helped search in 1988, local ranger Leo Grant. Leo was older now, but his voice still sounded like someone who spoke to the woods as an equal. Leo said, we searched for 3 days. And we found things nobody wanted to write down. Kids' clothes were hanging from trees along the North Trail. Neatly, like someone hung them to dry. But the official story said the kids ran south toward the lake, so why were their clothes on the north side? And there was more. 2 miles out, we saw fresh truck tracks. Deep ruts in grass. But there's no road there. Someone drove into the forest on purpose. Ethan asked about people with badges.
Leo gave a small, tired smile, the kind adults wear when they admit they used to be naive.
A week later, guys showed up. Federal badges. Said it was national security. They walked around with metal detectors. They pushed me away like a kid. Then, silence. Everybody shut up. Megan added, after the disappearance, a psychologist came from Washington, asked about every child. But he cared most about their families. Ethan did what any detective should do when mysticism starts creeping in. He made a list of the families. And he saw what nobody wanted to see in 1988. Every single kid had relatives connected to places normal people don't enter by accident. Defense contractors. Engineers. Technical staff on restricted sites. People whose workdays were small pieces of government secrecy. Ethan said out loud, that's not a random group. Then the lab confirmed it. The neckerchiefs carried traces of a rare chemical compound used in specific defense sector production chains. It couldn't have gotten there by accident. When Ethan showed Leo the report, the old ranger went pale. Leo said, I know where that chemical shows up. There's a facility about 60 miles from here. People don't talk about it. They joke about it like it's a ghost. An underground complex. A bunker. The kind of place built for a war that nobody wants to admit they expect. Ethan filed an official request. The reply came cold. Dry. Politely threatening. The facility existed, and one paragraph flipped the case upside down. 1986 to 1991, used under a program called FutureLine. Supervisor, Colonel Alexander Sutherland. That name hit Megan like a stone through glass. The scar. The military posture. The calm certainty of a man who didn't need permission. And then, something happened that rarely happens in clean stories, but always arrives at the perfect moment. A witness appeared. A 45-year-old woman came forward after a small local newspaper ran an article. She said, my name is Olivia Grace. In 1973,
I was in a youth camp in northern Minnesota.
10 kids disappeared there too. Ethan said automatically, but the archives say the kids were never found. Olivia looked at him and said, we were found 3 months later. We were returned to our families. We were forced to sign non-disclosure papers. And we were told, you saw nothing.
She had stayed quiet for 28 years. But when she saw the photo of the neckerchiefs, she knew the story was repeating.
Ethan asked, where were you for those 3 months? Olivia said, down below. In an underground city.
They taught us survival like the world was about to end.
Sutherland told us we were chosen. That war was coming. That we would rebuild civilization. Ethan asked, why did they let you go? Olivia shrugged. One day he gathered us and said the alarm was false. No war. Go home. But remember, you're special. And someday, you'll use what you learned. Then she said something that made every conspiracy angle feel brutally practical. We still talk. A quiet group. And almost all of us became successful. Doctors. Engineers. Military analysts. Like they really did rewrite us for results. And the question turned cruel. If they released the kids in 1973, why didn't the 1988 group come back? Ethan knew the time for paper was over. He drove to the facility. No permission, of course. Sometimes the government behaves like it isn't hiding secrets, but collecting them. Like a hobby for adults in expensive suits. Ethan went unofficially. Leo went because he knew the woods.
Megan went because she refused to stay behind.
She said, I need to see where they could have gone. And understand why they weren't returned.
At the entrance, there were rusted structures and signs screaming abandoned, but the mud held fresh tire tracks.
Someone had been there recently. They forced a way in. Behind the steel door, stairs descending. 40 meters underground. Down there, corridors. Rooms. File cabinets.
And the scariest part of places like that isn't the concrete.
It's when an abandoned bunker still has electricity. In an archive room, they found folders filled with photographs. Hundreds of children's faces. Dates. Years. Ethan flipped through them and felt the pattern lock into place. Every few years. Always summer. Always a group. Often 10. The 1988 folder held 10 familiar photos. Under each photo, a status. 9 said, transferred to clean slate.
Under Sam Peterson, held for phase 2.
Megan whispered, clean slate. Ethan opened the next folder.
Procedure protocols for memory erasure.
No movie romance. No hypnotic spirals. Dry instructions. Dosages. Notes. 9 teens from 1988 failed final tests. Their memories were erased.
They were placed back into the foster system under new names.
Alive. But living someone else's life. Sam was kept. Prepared as a successor. Ethan understood, this wasn't a myth. This was an industrial process, and someone had run it for years. He found an internal secure line and started calling. First call, Des Moines, Iowa. Yes, September 1988, a girl entered the system. Now she's a teacher. Second, Spokane, Washington. Yes, a boy entered group housing.
Now he's a software engineer.
Third. Fourth. Fifth. In an hour, they located 9. They were alive. They didn't remember. Ethan looked at Megan and saw 2 emotions fighting on her face. Relief. And rage. Because if they were alive, then no river took them. Meaning someone had lied for 13 years. One question remained. Where was Sam? And where was Sutherland? In the director's office, they found a diary. Last entry, July 2001. Disease progressing. Only months left. Project must be completed.
And one line, Sam P. ready to become successor. Studying psychology at the University of Michigan under the name Paul Norris. Ethan knew they had to find him before someone else did.
Paul Norris lived in a dorm. 26 years old.
He looked like a normal student, backpack, exhaustion, the eyes of someone who didn't know his life was drafted by someone else.
He said, "I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Paul.
My parents are Professor Norris and his wife.
I don't know any Sam Peterson." Ethan showed him the Camp Starlight photo.
Paul stared. His fingers trembled. Then he said quietly, "That boy, he looks like me."
"But I don't remember." "Why don't I remember?" Ethan said, "Because your memory was erased. Your name was Sam Peterson. In 1988, you disappeared. You were taken by Alexander Sutherland." Paul went pale. He said, "That name, I dream about corridors. Underground doors. A man in uniform. He says, 'You're special, Sam. You'll lead the new world.'" Ethan replied, "Those aren't dreams. They're fragments."
Paul grabbed his head, like he was trying to hold reality in place. Then he spoke, dragging words out of fog, "I remember pieces.
We were down there. For a long time. Then, the other kids disappeared and I stayed. And then Paul said something that tightened Ethan's throat. "A week ago I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo, me as a child. And an address in Minnesota. And one line, 'Time to remember.'" Ethan realized, this wasn't the past catching Paul.
Sutherland was calling him.
Paul said, "I have to go." Ethan answered, "Not alone. Megan insisted on coming. Leo came too."
Because 13 years of waiting turns ordinary people into people who will drive straight into the dark, if that's where the truth is.
The address led to an old, abandoned camp by a lake. Cabins collapsed. Paths swallowed by weeds. But in the main building, a light was on. Paul whispered, "He's here. I can feel it." They stepped inside. The lobby was empty. From a distant office, classical music drifted.
The kind people play when they're certain nobody will stop them.
That confidence is often a mistake, but some people make it with impressive dedication.
Sutherland sat in a chair by the window.
An old man on oxygen. A weak body.
But the eyes were still sharp. And those eyes looked at Paul not like a person, but like property. He smiled and said, "Sam.
I knew you'd come." Paul said, "My name is Paul."
Sutherland shook his head.
"No. You're Sam Peterson. The best of all of them. The only one who passed every test. My heir." Paul said, "I'm not your heir. You stole me. You stole my childhood." Sutherland replied calmly, like a lecturer, "I gave you more. Purpose. Skills. Resilience.
Look at you, top student, future psychologist. That's my work."
Megan couldn't hold it. "Where are the other children?"
Sutherland answered like he was reading file names, "They failed selection.
I gave them new lives. Normal ones. Without dangerous knowledge." Megan said, "You had no right." Sutherland said, "I had a duty. To the future."
The world was unstable.
It needed leaders. I created them. Ethan turned on his recorder. "You're admitting involvement in the disappearance of children."
Sutherland said, "I admit it.
And I don't apologize."
Then he gave a number, 320 children over 30 years.
Most alive. Successful. I'm not a killer. I'm an architect of the future. Paul stepped closer and asked, "Why me?" Sutherland smiled. "You endured isolation. You built a second world in your head to survive. And you had the perfect balance, empathy, and cold calculation." Paul said, "I won't continue your work." Sutherland whispered, "You already are. Check your notes.
Paul pulled up photos of his study notes.
In the margins were annotations he didn't remember writing. Selection method. Test in practice. Apply on group.
Paul stared, realizing someone had drafted his life and he'd signed the bottom.
Then footsteps slammed in the hall.
An officer Ethan had called and burst into the office.
Basement. Kids.
They ran downstairs. In a room that looked like a classroom sat 10 teenagers.
12 to 14. Reading textbooks. Solving problems.
Like this was a field trip, not a crime scene.
Megan asked, "What did you do to them?"
Sutherland, barely breathing now, said, "Medication and suggestion.
Reduces anxiety. Increases compliance. It wears off." Ethan asked, "Where did these kids come from?"
Sutherland said, "A summer camp 30 miles from here.
I chose the best. I wanted to start a new group."
So the machine was still running.
Even in 2001.
Even with him dying. Sutherland was arrested.
He didn't resist.
He asked for 5 minutes alone with Sam, recorded.
Ethan allowed it. Sutherland said to Paul, "I'm dying. But the project can't die. There are others. First graduates. They're waiting for a signal.
If I disappear, they'll continue on their own.
And they won't be as careful as I was."
Paul said, "The project dies with you." Sutherland smiled, the smile of a man planting one last mine under the table.
"Then you won't control what comes next."
Days later, Sutherland died in a prison clinic. But before he died, he requested a sealed envelope be delivered to Paul. Inside, a key to a bank safe deposit box, and a note, "The archives are there.
Every child. Every method. Destroy it, or use it. Your choice." Paul went to the bank with Ethan. The box held folders, discs, photos, lists, reports.
It wasn't a bomb that breaks walls. It was the kind that shatters lives.
A commission was formed: psychologists, lawyers, public representatives. They began locating graduates carefully and giving each one a choice: know the truth, or keep the life they believed in. Reactions were different. Some thanked them. Some cursed them.
Some broke, because realizing my life was written by someone else isn't a plot twist.
It's an identity crash. There were unexpected consequences too. 2 people from the program turned out to be married.
They met in college, had kids, never knowing they once sat in the same underground classroom.
When they learned, they went silent for a week.
Then they said, "If our life was built on a lie, we'll build a new one on reality."
5 graduates created an organization called ARC Kids.
They helped others survive the reveal.
They did what Sutherland never did: they healed, instead of engineering. Megan returned to education.
She became the principal of a school for troubled teens.
She said, "I couldn't protect those 10. But I can protect the next ones." Paul finished university and went into work with children in foster care.
But he stopped choosing the best.
He said, "Sutherland taught me to see potential. But potential is everywhere. You don't steal kids from families.
You help them where they are." In 2012, a federal support program was passed for victims of secret research, compensation, therapy, privacy protection. By then, hundreds of people had been found, people with a blank spot where childhood should have been. The 10 red neckerchiefs were given to the State Museum. They were placed in a hall with a name that was simple and brutal: stolen childhood. At the opening, a woman spoke, the teacher who'd been pulled from a camp and returned under a different name.
She said, "We can't bring the past back. But we can make sure it never happens again. Children aren't material for experiments. They're human. With the right to a name. To memory. To choice." The room stood. And in the front row sat 2 families, biological and adoptive, crying the same way. Because love doesn't ask which name came first. It looked like the story was over. Kids found. Truth revealed. The man behind it dead. But the echo stayed.
A year after Sutherland's death, 10 people walked into police stations across the country.
Same age range.
Same missing piece in early childhood.
And one shared detail, all received